It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
It's the Happy Families Podcast. Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the host and parenting expert on Channel 9's hit TV show, Parental Guidance. Season 2 is getting closer. I finally received word from Channel 9. It's on the way. I'm not allowed to say more than that, but it's on the way. It's nearly here. Keep your eye out for it. I'm joined today by Christine Layton. She's filling in for Kylie, who's looking after the kids because it's school holidays. The podcast continues, but with a new co-host. Christine is the ABC Perth and WA afternoon presenter on ABC Radio and a mum of a 4-year-old with a new baby on the way. Hey, Christine, when's the baby arrive?
Oh, when does the baby arrive? That is a very good question, Justin. Look, technically, and funnily enough, my son is due on my daughter's birthday. So my obstetrician thinks that we bang once a year. That's not the case, I swear. It was just a Christmas thing. So probably, mid-July. We'll see how we go. But he's pretty big, Justin.
Really? Are you expecting to push out a heifer here, are you?
I am, yes. My husband is a Scottish Adonis, very tall, very hairy, very loving and friendly. Looks like Woody from Toy Story. So I'm expecting one of the same.
I hope that when my wife describes me to other people, she doesn't say very hairy. But
I love his hair, and when we started dating, it was one of the things I love most. His smell, I just nuzzled into it. Anyway, that's too much.
It kind of is.
Speaking of things that make you special and discovering your identity, right. I wanted to ask you today how to help my children discover their identity and what makes them special. Because I remember being at school and, when it was someone's birthday and they were made a fuss of, I was jealous. And, if I saw that somebody was really good at sport and could hurdle like Shirley, what's her surname, mate? Oh, no.
I was going to say Temple and then I was going to say McLean, but I don't think it's either of them.
Shirley Strickland.
Thank you.
I got that's pregnant brain for you. I really wanted to find what I was good at. So I would like to help my daughter and son do the same thing in a very gentle parenting kind of way. So how do you start that process, Justin?
All right. So before I answer that question, I think that there's something really, really important that we need to touch on. And I picked this up from the wonderful James Anderson in our recent Raising Resilient Kids Summit. He talked about this extensively. And there's a phrase that you used that I've got to come back to. You said, I want to help them to find what they're good at. Want to help them find what they're good at. And James Anderson said, I can hear the neuroticism coming out. Oh no, what have I said wrong? This is what he said. He said, you don't discover your abilities, you create them. Now, it's true that there are some people who are born with more fast twitch muscle fibers and some with more slow twitch muscle fibers. And it's true that there are some people who, because of the environments that they're raised in, are surrounded with music or art, or maybe they just have something that other kids don't. But what the research really clearly shows is that within a pretty short period of time, if you don't do much with that innate ability that you're born with, that special talent, gift, or whatever you might want to call it, strength, if you don't do much with that other than, do your thing and gloat in the fact that you're really good at it compared to all of your classmates, anyone at school who is going to go and put the time and effort into creating the ability, they'll probably catch up to you and overtake you reasonably quickly if you don't go and do the work yourself. And so we don't find what we're good at, we create it. And I really, really like that idea.
I should have been teaching her piano from the age of 3. Is that what you're saying? Justin, and giving her treats?
I'm creating it like
scales right. I see what she enjoys.
Yes.
And obviously this is very early days. I'm very much just trying to think how I can support them. Like my dad supported me. He could see that I loved playing the recorder and he was like, this is torturous, we'll get her a clarinet. And so he got me a clarinet, and then he would drive me to music rehearsals at 7 a.m. every single day. I was in jazz band, concert band, choir, clarinet ensemble, sax ensemble, and he obviously saw that I really loved it, and so he facilitated that learning process for me. So I guess I want to be able to do the same thing for her without putting my loves and my own hobbies and loves onto her, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So let's unpack that a little bit as well, though. There are three reasons that kids are going to be drawn to, and probably more than this, but my big three. Even if they've got, whether they have an innate natural ability for something or not, kids are going to be drawn to things that they do well. So just by virtue of the fact that you can do something well, whether it's playing Fortnite or playing the recorder or surfing, swimming, running, whatever, kids, we call this we call it a performance goal orientation. And we can have one of two orientations to performance goals. Okay, the first orientation to a performance goal is an approach orientation. We approach performance goals when we know we can do them well. And we avoid, the second one is the avoidant orientation, which is if I know that I'm going to look incompetent, I'm not going to do it. You know that thing where who's going to stand up and give the talk in school? Who's going to do that thing on assembly? Who's going to be the volunteer in PE class to do that new skill that we're learning? And the people who step forward, they're the ones who already know how to do it and they can do it competently. The rest of us, we all used to hide in the corner and get as far away from the teacher as we could. We would avoid, like the plague, anything that would make us look incompetent. So when we're talking about your little Bonnie at 4 years old, she will be, well, actually, there's something beautiful about 4-year-olds. They're pretty much, they're drawn to anything. They don't care if they're incompetent or not. They just say, yes, let me at it. I want to attack the world and figure it all out. I want to assimilate every bit of knowledge that I can about everything in my brain. But by the time they start to get to about, I don't know, let's say 6, 7, definitely 8 or 9, there's this thing, this social comparison starts to come up. They become aware that other people are looking at them, making judgments about them, comparing themselves to others. When that comes in, we see this orientation, this goal orientation shift from approaching to avoiding. And that's devastating for our kids. So competence is a big driver. Once our kids get to about 7 or 8, certainly 9 or 10, the competence is a big driver of what they'll move towards, what they'll try and do. The next big driver is relationships. So if you want your kids to do well at something, they've got to be around people they love. Like, how much did you love your bandmates?
Oh, I loved him. Yeah. And we'd have so much fun on the bus on the way to concerts. Oh, that you are absolutely right. That was at least 50% of it for me.
Yeah. And for a lot of kids, it's even more. For a lot of kids, they only do the thing that they're doing because of their friends. And there's a handful of things that I used to do when I was a kid, and I only did it because my friends were there. And there were some things that I did as a kid where I was quite competent, but I had no relationships. And because the relationships didn't exist, I pulled out, I backed away, I wouldn't be involved in it. And so there's the relationships, but there's also that last bit. And this taps into what you were talking about before with trying to push the kids into this thing or that. And you made that comment where you said that you really want to make sure that she's doing things that she wants to do and not the things that you want her to do. This is where autonomy comes in. Now, I'm going to say something really provocative. I don't think that it matters if you want her to do it or not. Like, if you want her to do it and she learns to be competent at it and her relationship with you builds and she's feeling like she enjoys it so much that she doesn't want to stop doing it, then to me that's fine, because she's internalized the same love for that thing that you have. I'll give you a case in point. Surfing. Surfing.
Yes.
I just love surfing, and I have some children who are just frankly not that enthusiastic about surfing, and it pains me because I want to go surfing with my daughters. I want to get them out in the water. But something has happened as I have forced them into situations that they don't necessarily want to be in. They've started to actually really love, number one, being with me, but number two, they've started to develop competence in the water on that surfboard, and they've started to enjoy surfing for its own sake, to the point now where a couple of the kids will grab the boards and go to the beach without me. And I mean, they're still terribly incompetent, but they've found a love of the water and a love of surfing independent of me. Now, the central thing here is you've got to be careful how long you pull out the whip and crack it and drive the kids into the water or drive the kids to that musical instrument or that thing that you care about so much. You've got to really listen to the kids as well. Cycling was my other passion, and one of my kids came along to the velodrome and we bought her a bike and spent all the money, and after 4 weeks she was like, yeah, I actually hate this. Well, that was an expensive, it was a really costly exercise for us. But again, we didn't want to drive her because she had no relationships there. She felt completely incompetent. Like they were wiping the floor with her. It was terrible. And mostly I was every Friday night for track night at the velodrome. I was like, you need to come down here. I've spent all this money. I'm demanding that you do it. And she had no autonomy. So those needs weren't being met.
You know, it's really interesting, Justin. 3 interviews spring to mind from recently. I interviewed the Doobie Brothers. I interviewed Sting's son, Joe Sumner, and I interviewed James Morrison, the famous jazz trumpeter.
Wow.
And this came up with each of them, and I didn't actually bring it up. Now, obviously with Sting's son, he is a musician, but he's doing it differently, right? He's taken the music, he loves the music, he's got that from his dad, but he's going to be a present father. James Morrison's sons, 2 of them, William and Harry, are in his quartet, right? But he said to me that he very much played good music around the house, but left them to it. He'd hear them in the garage making mistakes, you know, screwing up chords, and it killed him, but he didn't go in, and he waited for them to come to him, and he said that worked. But when it came to putting them in the quartet to travel around the country, he waited until they were more than ready. So I found it really interesting, just from a musical point of view, the different stars, I guess they are, and how they broach this. And similarly with the Doobie Brothers, Pat Simmons, his son Pat Simmons Jr. also went into music, is recording, but is very much more about the family. So isn't that an interesting thing?
I love the alignment, and there's such great examples. I just really, really love that, especially the masterful James Morrison saying, I didn't go and correct them. I waited for them to come to me. Just perfect. Now, I've got one more question for you, because this is ultimately what are my kids going to be good at? How do I help them to establish an identity? I think the first word that you used when we started this conversation was identity. And I just want to make one last point by asking you a question. How old were you before you feel like you had your identity dialed in, like you felt like you knew who you were?
30.
Yeah.
Dead serious.
Yeah.
30.
Yeah. So I would actually say 40 for me.
Yeah.
I mean, we're growing. Our identity is becoming increasingly firm and consolidated over time. And I'm even finding in my last decade of life that I'm seeing my identity shift further and grow more and develop in ways that, for the most part, I'm really thrilled about. And every now and again, ways that I don't love as well. But identity is not set, and it takes a long time to develop. So when you ask that first question, how do I help my daughter to develop her identity? I think it's super important that we emphasize the developmental nature of identity, and that children who are under about the age of, I'm going to say 11, 12, 13, don't tend to be thinking very much at all. Certainly under the age of 10, they're not thinking, who am I? Like, they don't have an existential crisis as a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old going, I'm not sure that this is consistent with who I am and my values. They don't even think about it. We know from good research that it's during the adolescent years that identity development really, really takes off. That's when it all kind of kicks off, and we start to get a really strong sense of who we are if we've had healthy identity development by the time we're in our late teens to early 20s. But by no means are we a finished product. It's not until, as you said, our late 20s, sometimes our 30s, sometimes even our 40s, where we finally say, okay, I know who I am. I know my voice. I know what I'm about. I heard this interview just recently with Harrison Ford. He's in that new Apple TV show, Shrinking.
Yes. And
he with a number of expletives thrown in, Harrison Ford basically said, I'm 80 years old. I know who I am. And I just remember the power of the statement as he said it. I know who I am. You don't get too many teenagers looking you in the eye and saying, I know who I am. That's something that comes later in life.
Yeah, it does. Much later, hence my very long pause. That is such a good point. And so I suppose I will just support her as best I can and have fun in the meantime.
Yeah, don't rush it. And remember, you don't discover your abilities or your identity. You create them. Boom. How's that?
Oh, deep. It's so deep.
Well, we tackle the big stuff on the Happy Families podcast. Hey, Christine, thanks for joining me. Let's do one more tomorrow if you're up for another chat, because these have been really delightful. It's been so much fun to have you on.
Oh, I would love it, Justin. See you tomorrow.
Okay, the Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rawn for Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And back tomorrow with more. If you'd like more information about making your family happier, please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.